I am on top of the world. I am so happy. My life is perfect. In the Arabic language, the word for disbeliever can also translate to an ingrate, one who is ungrateful. More important to me than power, fame, money, anything, um, physical pleasure, anything would be just for my brother and my father to pray 2 rakat with me.
The following is a conversation with Miles Gregory Cole, a man from Manchester who shares his inspiring journey of converting to Islam. In this insightful discussion, Miles opens up about the reasons behind his decision to embrace the faith, the challenges he faced, and how Islam has transformed his life, from the profound spiritual realizations to the practical impact of living as a Muslim. This is a heartfelt narrative that sheds light on the beauty and meaning of faith. Join us as we delve into Miles' story, his reflections on life in Islam, and the lessons he has learned along the way.
I guess to start with, it's important to say that I was born and raised in England, and it's in the countryside. So I was born in a kind of medium-sized town in a county called Buckinghamshire. And I was raised on a farm. My grandfather and now my uncles are farmers. So a cottage on the top of a hill in basically the middle of nowhere. So Islam, this isn't London or Birmingham or Manchester. It's quite rural. And I was raised with no deen, not Christian, not Muslim, nothing. Just a kind of form of postmodernism, secular, atheist. My parents, drank alcohol, went to parties, went to Las Vegas, and just lived a life based on their whims and desires. And without going on too long, I went to a small primary school in the village. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to go to a boarding school, one of the top institutes for education in the whole of England, for a sports scholarship. So that kind of changed the trajectory of my life because it was an international school. In hindsight now, I realized that there were Muslims there because nominally their names were Muslim, but it was multi-ethnic, multicultural. It had even though it was a Church of England school that had a beautiful large chapel that we would go to several times a week, including Sunday. There was a lot of different people from different religious backgrounds. And then I went to a Catholic university in London, and I studied philosophy. And I guess in some sense, this was the start of my intellectual or academic investigation into the reality of our existence. It's miraculous, is it not? The fact that we're breathing, our hearts are beating, we are alive, we're being showered with blessings. Comes to mind, Surah Rahman, which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? But the atheist has the veil, they see with their eyes, but not with their heart. But to conclude with my time before Islam, it was filled with, at university, like many young people in the West, it was filled with partying and drugs and girls and all of the haram, although it was not haram to me, it was just the normal, it was what everybody did. And I guess a mild existential crisis, a mild kind of burying my head in the sand. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what I'm doing. My friends are depressed. They're anxious. There's no direction. Let's all just, get high and forget about what the life we live actually means and if there is accountability. Then, once I graduated from university, I moved to Manchester. And I lived in Manchester for several years. And I moved back down to my home county, and I actually embraced Islam in the town that I was born in,
Mhm.
mashallah.
What was your perception of Muslims and Islam before you began your journey of discovery?
Good question. I think, to be honest, for me personally, broadly speaking, it was, there was not much opinion. I wasn't one of those people who saw the Muslims in a bad light. I was not somebody who had preconceptions and negativity. Growing up, my time at the end of my school and at the start of my university, I started to really get involved in exploring so many different rabbit holes, so many different traditions, so many different, not conspiracy theories, but alternative ways of thinking and perceiving the world we live in. So, something that comes to mind, for example, is obviously 2001 with the World Trade Centers. It's inextricably linked. The war on terrorism, George
Mhm.
Bush.
Yeah.
I'm 28 currently, so I remember growing up. I'm kind of a child of the Bush Blair era, and because I remember I was 5 years old. I remember seeing the Afghanistan wars on the television. My dad talking to me about it. So my point is with that is, as I grew up and I started to investigate, actually, long before I even embraced Islam, I didn't have these negative preconceptions because I already knew that it's not like the West's hands are completely clean. It's a two-way street. What's happening in relation to Islamic extremism in many ways is a response to kind of the Western hegemony and a lot of the things that are extreme that the West, are doing. So it's this kind of tension that exists. Um, so yeah, ultimately, to be honest, I was oblivious. I didn't even really think of it. It was only in hindsight when I became Muslim and I started to realize, oh, that person was called Abs. That person was called Ali. That person was called X, Y, and Z, Mo. And I was like, oh, obviously they're Muslim. Well, some of the stuff that they were doing and I was doing with them, it was not Islam. And that's something we have to differentiate, of course, is Islam with nominal Muslims.
Yeah.
But to conclude, kind of fortunately, I think this was one of the blessings, is a blank slate. I didn't have really any preconception of the Muslims because I was just in my own world.
How did you first came across information about Islam?
Yes, Bismillah. I think something. So, if I may just go back one
Sure.
second to studying philosophy at university, because that is a real core part of all of this. Is philosophy translates the etymology of the word philosophy. It comes from the Greek philosophy, the love of wisdom. And having studied all of the philosophers, not only in antiquity, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, etc., but in the modern world as well, the German philosophers, the French philosophers, the English philosophers, and so on. And coming to realize that in the modern context, they by and large were atheist. They believed in the Enlightenment. They believed in the Renaissance, the new world coming into existence, a rejection and denial of God, and an empowerment of man and his abilities, which obviously come from Allah, but that's part of their rejection. And with philosophy, my conclusion after graduating was that if philosophy is the love of wisdom, and these philosophers that I studied in the Western canon didn't really bring any answers, they were just kind of throwing around ideas, but with no solid conclusions. Where does wisdom come from? It's not these white old men who have their own prejudice and have their own motives. It must come from something, an objective moral framework. This was really at university, this was my passion, was about objective morality. we live in a world now where people, if it's good for you, you do it. As long as you're not harming me, you can do whatever you want. If you think it's good, then it's good. This subjective morality. And reading a lot of the famous German philosopher Nietzsche, the kind of he's the pinnacle of nihilism. Nothing matters, nothing. You can kind of make up your own way in life. My point is that an objective moral framework was what I was fascinated with, and a series of events happened which led to me moving first and foremost from an atheist, what I would consider in my life growing up, just a normal person. Everybody I grew up with, nobody was religious. In England, Christianity is dead. Your grandma is Christian. It's something that the churches, wallahi, they're empty.
That's new to me.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to have to tell you that because I wish that
Don't be.
England was
Yeah.
I would prefer a strong
Oh, really?
Orthodox Christian country
Okay.
than an atheist, secular, nihilist country. Obviously, the best would be a Muslim country, but of course, the British Isles has a 1,000-year history, approximately, of Christianity, but this has died in the kind of post World War II era. So I don't want to jump ahead, but I was practicing Christianity for a very short period of time, which is actually how I came to Islam, which I guess answers your question.
Yeah.
Um, I I did undertake so number one, a series of events happened which made me go from believing that there's no God, there's no afterlife, there's no morality. It's a kind of you can just make it up and do whatever you want. There's no meaning, there's no consequence to belief in a God. That was first and foremost. And so I think that if somebody's listening to our conversation and they believe in God, they believe in a creator, they believe in a kind of the peak supernatural hierarchical entity that is all knowing, all powerful, Al Khaliq, the creator, Al Aziz, the Almighty. If they believe in effectively in Arabic, the God, Allah, they believe in God, if they're comfortable with that term, that's fine, then they are so close to Islam. But if they don't believe in God, then it's going to be difficult for them to even conceptualize what we're talking about and what we're trying to, because there's that hijab there's that barrier that means that they're stuck to get any further. So I guess to conclude and answer, I came across Islam after realizing that, of course, the fitra was the kind of my fitra must have been enshrouded, must have been covered. It it was unable to see. A series of events happened which took that cover off, and now I could accept was what I always knew, but did not accept, which is that there is a God. And then I started to investigate. Okay, how can I live? What set of rules, what tradition, what religion can I embody to, appropriately fit this feeling I have of there being a God? So I started to basically undertake a quite deep and intensive comparative religious study. Let me look into all of the religions and give them their right. I looked into Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Taoism. I looked into all these different ways of life, and Sikhism as well. I think there's some beauty, of course, and some truth to all of these religions, but it's not the ultimate truth, which obviously is Islam, alhamdulillah. So, and after all this, I lived at the time in Manchester, in England, Manchester, famous, of course, for the football teams, and I lived opposite a church called St. Margaret's. And I was doing all of these religious comparisons. Islam, it spoke to me a little bit, but I felt, to be honest, and this will be common for a lot of people listening, if they're from the West or England or the US, is to me, Islam was something Pakistani. Islam was something African. It was something we, of course, know as two white gentlemen that it's not anything to do with ethnicity or background. It's something to do with your heart and your soul and the ni'mah of Allah to allow you to be able to live a life in accordance to you know to stay on the straight path. But I was like, I'm English. I believe in God. I can literally see a church from my window. I was like, why should I go for some foreign religion, Sikhism, Islam, go to the temple or the mosque where there's people who look different? I said, I'll just go to the church, literally downstairs opposite my house. And I started doing that. And I remember only after a few weeks, I remember the date because it was my friend's birthday, the 26th of September, 2021. This was after maybe 1 year after realizing that there was a God and changing my lifestyle, removing myself from all of those things I mentioned earlier, even though I was not Muslim yet. But I reduced all of the haram, intoxicants, things that we shouldn't do, so on and so forth, free mixing, parties, etc. I was starting to move myself away from those things. A 90% reduction. And even when I was present, I felt uncomfortable. I could sense something was changing. But after a few weeks, which, like I say, I went to the church maybe after 1 year of this journey, slowly. And I had this really strange experience, which was I could believe in God, I could get that, but I was like, who is this Jesus guy? What is Jesus in relation to God, Christianity? They've got an idol of him at the front of the church, that kind of very famous one where he has the sun around his head and he's got his beard, mashallah. That's what I was struggling with. But then one day, on this day, it was a Sunday, September 26th, while I was in the church, so I would go every Sunday. I think it was maybe my second or third time going to the Sunday service. I had this strange feeling in the church. It was like this, I don't know, these tingles, this strange feeling. And as I came out, I was just like, Jesus existed. Jesus was a powerful human being, somebody who changed the world, somebody who makes sense to listen to. So that allowed me I saw that and I went to my friend's house who lived a not too long a walk away. And I said, bro, I think I'm Christian. And all my friends are atheists. He was just like, bro, that's far out, man. No way. I was like, yeah. He's just like, bro, that's so weird. I was like, I know, but like, I knew God existed for some time, and I've somehow accepted Jesus. Jesus is, I love Jesus. Jesus is awesome. Now at the time I didn't accept him as God, and I never did as a Christian. From that time, without going on much longer, good sir, from that time, I reconnected with my mother. So another backstory is that for some time, I was estranged from my family. I didn't speak to my mother for a long period of time, my father for a long period of time, my uncles and cousins and grandparents. A situation that happened in my adolescence meant that there was a lot of anger, resentment, confusion. There was a split in the family. And it meant that they would reach out, but I was a young man. I don't want to deal with this. I went on my own path. And this was also something that was changing. Once I realized God existed, I had basically what I could only describe as an angelic experience. And I kind of suddenly felt, it was almost as if the black dots that we hear about on my heart, as if they were removed, the nur of Allah, the ni'mah of Allah, to basically melt my heart. My frozen heart melted, and I never cried from maybe my teenage years until for maybe 10 years. Never cried. I was a strong man. I was, tough, and I would never cry. But this journey of kind of spirituality. I don't like to kind of use that term, but these things were happening to me seemingly outside of my control. That and this was the kind of the conclusion where I just suddenly, subhanallah, I had this angelic experience. I got into, in hindsight now, this was the 1 year before I went to the church. And this is the 1 year before when I started to believe in God. In hindsight now, I basically prayed the way that we pray as a Muslim. Not exactly, but the positions where I was on the floor with my hands like this. I then went my forehead on the ground. I was crying. I don't know if like I don't want to make claims because it was all kind of it was really intense, and like I don't even remember some of it now because it was like 4 years ago. And I'm not saying that like, well, angels are everywhere, we just can't see them. So I'm not saying that, angels probably, it probably was angelic. But that was really the start. And then my point is that from that experience, not only did I believe in God, but I reached out to all my family to make amends, to say, I know you guys are sorry, I'm sorry. Look, it's been years, it's been a long time, life is short, I love you, you love me, let's make up, let's rebuild. And that was the start of a rebuilding process with all of them, mashallah, that has just continued to flourish, as I embraced Islam as well and got married. And now they have grandchildren slash great grandchildren, nephew, and so on.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them.
I mean, and guide them to Islam. I mean,
Amen.
that would just be, that would just be breakdown in tears if I found out somebody in my family
Inshallah.
embraced Islam.
Inshallah.
Subhanallah, that. But my point is that I was then speaking to my mother for maybe about 1 year or about 9 months. Text messages, voice messages, phone calls, FaceTimes. We were rebuilding our relationship. Then we re-met, my grandmother and my mother. We came together, we ate food, we caught up. It was a very beautiful experience. And then very soon after that, my mother said to me, we've not been in each other's lives for so long because we kind of lost each other. Now we found each other. This was obviously by the grace of Allah. Said, why don't you come back and live with me and be near your family? And at the time, it just made perfect sense for a number of different reasons. And so I said, absolutely, let's do it. I'll be closer to my brother, to my grandparents, to my mother, and so on. Bismillah. And I was actually starting a master's degree. It was online. It was at the University Trinity St. David's in Wales. And it was a master's degree in philosophy and religion. And on these Zoom meetings that we would have, lectures, there was a Muslim there he spoke at maybe he was like a UN interfaith person, imam or something. And at this time, I was realizing that as I was going to the church, it was a big thing for me when I moved back in with my mother. For me, when I was looking, I was finding out where the closest church is. I have to go to church on Sunday. Even though I was brand new, I knew this was going to be a big part of my life. And when I told my mum and my grandmother about it, they weren't surprised, which is strange because obviously they know me so well from birth up until when I was like 18, that whole time. And my grandmother, she thought maybe I was going to be like a vicar, like a Christian minister, wear the collar, the dog tag, dog collar. And my mother, she also thought maybe I would go down a path of something a bit more monastic, kind of exit the world and be a monk, vows of chastity and poverty and so on. But the big thing that I was facing, the big problem I was facing in the church, it's called I think it's called the Apollo's Creed. They say it every Sunday at church. I believe in God Almighty, the creator of the heavens and the earth. And I believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross and he is Lord, right? Something like this. Now, the first bit, I found what I was doing was as they read it, and we had like a little pamphlet, and I would read half of it because I didn't want to say anything that I didn't wholeheartedly believe. So when they said, I believe in Almighty God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, I would say that loud and proud. But when they said, and Jesus Christ died on the cross and he is Lord, I was like, I don't really know about that. So I'm not going to say it. How do they know about it? I know that Almighty God's the creator of the heaven and the earth because it's a visceral feeling. It's something I just like I know I have two eyes. I you never see your own eyes. You see a reflection of your eyes. You can see a picture of your eyes, but you never see your own eyes. But obviously, you can see. I know I have eyes. Same thing. It's like I know there's a God, even though I don't see him. So I don't need a physical scientific proof. I have that. It's like the way that I love my wife and I love my son. Where's where's the proof? I can show through my actions. Well, I can show you that Allah exists through my actions. Every day I pray. Every day I read his book. Every day I live my life to give charity. I live my life around Allah. So that's the proof. If you want to compare it to my love for my wife, I love my wife because I provide for her, I protect her, I, you know, treat her with kindness and gentleness. That's the proof of love. But there's no physical, tangible proof. It's just my declaration of it that one can either accept or reject. So I was struggling with this Jesus concept. I had accepted, strangely, Jesus into my heart as a Christian, but I guess I was a Unitarian Christian. The Trinity I was not on that Trinitarian vibe. I wanted it to make sense, but it did not make sense. So then at these university Zoom calls, this imam, this UN interfaith imam person, we were talking about religious symbols. And they were saying, can religions coexist and can these symbols come together? And he was adamant. He was saying, well, the problem is that in Islam, we cannot have idolatry. We're not a religion of symbols. The symbols is in Islam really, other than the moon and crescent, which is something that came, quite some time after the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You have really calligraphy. You have the symbol maybe of Allah written in Arabic, and that's kind of an Islamic symbol, but we're not a religion of symbols. And he just gave me this aura of such certainty that Islam was the truth. And I was so uncertain that Christianity was the truth, but I was a Christian. I remember I was writing these Sunday reflections. Every Sunday, once I came back from church, I would write maybe 1 or 2 or 3 pages of my thoughts. And I started to write, can I be Muslim and Christian at the same time? Because I started to accept parts of Islam, Tawheed started to make so much sense. And so I would say ultimately, the way that I came to see Islam was through my own investigation. But can I actually just say this? I do
Sure, sure.
apologize. Is that my second year of university? So at this time, I would have been maybe approaching 21 years old, 20 to 21 years old. I did buy a Quran and I did read it. But I didn't get past the 100th ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah because it was so confronting. And I think this is a big issue for the disbeliever or the non-believer, the non-Muslim. So early on, if they read Surah Al-Baqarah in the English language, they suddenly see these huge statements of you will burn in the hellfire. Whoa, I don't know if I want to read this. Do you know what I mean? It's so confronting. It's a glad tidings for the believer. It's a good news for those that are mindful of God. But that's great. When I read it, it fills me with joy and optimism and hope. Wow, like what, life really matters. And if I stay on the straight path, then the reward is incomprehensible. But the non-believer, they get the other half. and they think, and I still, subhanallah, um, I still think of obviously all my family and friends. I still read those disbeliever ayat through the lens of everybody I know isn't Muslim. So I think sometimes it hits me in a certain way. Like when I was reciting just a day or two ago, um, and we're in, for example, Surah At-Takathur, لَتَرَوُنَّ الْجَحِيمِ. Suddenly you're like, wow, for, that whole surah of, verily, just you will see with certainty, ayn al yaqeen, your eyes will see with certainty, you will see the hellfire. And I'm there and I'm starting to get really emotional. Just thinking like all these people I know that think what I'm doing is foolish, is silly, is ridiculous, is laughable. Maybe they mock it. Maybe they think it's a phase, that it's a joke. Again, the secular mindset, it's almost like, oh, okay, Miles, he's a Muslim. That's good for him. Good guy. He's happy. Islam makes him happy. But my life makes me happy. So you do you and I do me. So it's like, as we say, lakum deenukum waliya deen. And throughout the Quran, Allah is telling our noble Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to basically, stuff Allah, I don't want to butcher it, but basically to chill. Don't lose sleep. Don't stress. You are just a man. You have no power to convert these people from Jahiliyyah to Islam. That's from Allah. You can only do what, mashallah, and may Allah reward you for it. I mean, what we are attempting to do by speaking to the online community, just sharing the message. So it was just ultimately my own research online, but also it had to come at the right time. And so the point of that tangent was when I received, for example, the Quran too early, my mindset wasn't right, my heart wasn't right. It didn't hit me in any way. It was nothing. I just put it down, and after maybe 1 week of reading it, it didn't touch me in any serious way. Once you believe in God, and then you read it, it will make sense, and it touches you in a different way. So, my own research, and for example, university, the philosophy, the theology, and my own experience as well. Like I say, to finish this question now, thanks so much for asking it, is strangely, many things happened before I took my Shahada that in hindsight was the Deen of Al-Islam. Like I say, I stopped drinking alcohol. I had no plan to become Muslim, but I stopped drinking alcohol. I didn't know how to pray, but I started to try to pray in my own way. I didn't know how. I just basically talk to God. Basically say, God, if you're real, I'm speaking to you. That's a huge step, I think. Because again, people, the atheists, the secular, rationalist, scientific person, mushrikeen, who's on Jahiliyyah, they just think that's so stupid, that's so silly, that why would I even, um, you know, I say, do it. And once then you get an answer, then you don't seem so silly. Because once you start to supplicate for particular things to happen in your life, and then things start happening, you're like, well, this is cause and effect. this is real in my life. So my own experience as well as external research, it was like my own kind of journey of things. I was doing things and I was getting results, and that also led me to Islam ultimately.
Mm. Where did you take your Shahada and how was that experience?
Okay, so I kind of took two Shahadas, and I'll tell you why. The the first one was, so I went down to London. So I was living in Manchester at the time, where I was going to this church where I accepted Jesus, and where 1 year before I believed in God. And then I went down to London and I took my Bible with me. And I was going to, there was an event, an underground music event. And there was my friends there, and it was drinking and drugs and all this Jahiliyyah stuff. Um, and again, I don't say that to be big or clever or to promote it. I say that to let people know that you can come to Islam from basically the absolute extreme. You could be living a life that, for me to become Muslim, wallahi, it gives me hope for my family and friends because I was so that the furthest thing from Islam you could think of that it just shows that subhanallah. Allow me to show you this. When I was at university, I have many tattoos on my body. It was part of my rebellion against maybe my parents, my family, society. Everybody. There's cultures. They rebel. And subhanallah, I was at a Catholic university. I used my overdraft, so I got into debt, which was a big problem in my time of Jahiliyyah. MashaAllah, now I'm completely debt free. Obviously, riba is waging war on Allah, and only one side wins when it's Allah and an opposing team. So, mashallah, I'm so grateful now that, making dua and doing the right things led me to going from quite a lot of debt, several thousands of pounds, which is not a small amount, to now having a big safety net and security for my family. And that's what's allowed us to come to Egypt and kind of, hear the adhan 5 times a day and to be amongst a population of 90% Muslims and study the Arabic language and increase my memorization of the Quran, mashallah, is the debt situation was I basically got into debt to get a tattoo. And I've got maybe 20 tattoos on my body now. But the first one I got, subhanAllah, let me try and show this to the camera. This just shows you how far I was from Islam. So if you can see that, it says FUCK, which is obviously a term of vulgarity. It's very commonly used in England, by the way, like it's just any other word, but it's, the Muslims, we want to use the speech of Allah, alhamdulillah, subhanallah, wallahu akbar. We don't want to say words of, you know, sexual innuendo or feces of dirt of filth, these kind of things. My point is that I have, subhanallah, and this now, it makes me, even now, like talking to you and this being broadcast to people on the internet, it makes me a bit emotional. It makes me feel like a fool, but I've got, and astaghfirullah, excuse me for using the language, but I have religion tattooed on my forearm. So it's an absolute attack on God. It's saying basically, the two fingers up, damn you, like, I'm in control. The kind of shirk, the worst thing you could possibly do. Think that you are almighty, you're all powerful, when obviously you're nothing. You're alive 1 minute, you're dead the next. And my point is that I was so far from Islam, it's unreal. So I went down to London, my Shahada. I went down to London and I was going to this underground rave. And I took my Bible with me. And my friend, whose house I was at when we arrived in London, in East London, Southeast London, I remember him laughing at me, like, that Bible's full of nonsense, rubbish. Why are you reading that, mate? Come on, like, this is all, you're on some silly path. And I was remember reading parts of it that were kind of, the way I like to look at it is that obviously we have the Quranic concept of the Injil. And some parts of the Bible, they do correlate with the Quran, but a lot of it has been corrupt, So I was reading the bits that were kind of, that even now as a Muslim, they make sense, talking about basically principles of Tawheed, enjoining the good, forbidding the evil. I was saying these things to my friends. They were dismissing me. They were laughing. But at the same time, I was having this problem with Jesus. So we went to this event and I told them all, this is my retirement. I'm not coming to any more of these things. I'm not going out to bars, to pubs, to nightclubs. I'm not listening to music. I'm not taking drugs. I'm not drinking. But I'd already said I was coming. So there was people that I'd not seen in a long time. I almost was thinking maybe I can give them dawah, a Christian dawah. I'm coming to this. I've already paid for the ticket. I've already kind of all booked it all. So I'm coming to this. But it's going to be my last one. So I didn't take any drugs or drink any alcohol. And I saw myself as like the daddy, the father of the group. I'm going to protect everybody. Because when everybody's out of off their head, out of this world, they're very vulnerable. You could be, you could have your money stolen, your watch, your phone stolen. It's dangerous for your health. You could get hit by a car. I was going to protect them. And wallahi, it was the first time that I was in one of these environments sober. And this is what I would ask somebody if they're in these environments, a normal English person, they go to parties, they go to music events, they drink alcohol, and drugs is even more extreme. Be in these environments sober, and your whole perspective will change. Dribbling babies, bumping into walls, their jaw falling off, their eyes rolling back. It's a freak show. It's a horror show. It's The Walking Dead. And it was just, I felt so, it was Jinn Central. Achi, it was Jinn Central. There's this dark basement, all kind of stuff going on, girls and drugs and stuff. It was very intense, very intense. So I said to everybody, I'm leaving. I'm leaving here. Usually you stay till sunrise, subhanallah. And we know this again, Islamically, that Allah has given us the portion of the day. I believe it's in Surah Naba, the portion of the day for livelihood, and has given us the night as a cloak to rest. So we have that circadian rhythm, which the prayers feed into as well. Go to bed after Isha, get some good rest, wake up for Fajr. If you're able to, pray some part of the night. But the disbeliever, in their jahiliyyah and their partying, they stay up all night. And then when the adhan goes off, obviously they don't know the adhan, but when Fajr comes in, the birds start tweeting, the Muslims start rising. That's when they're going to sleep, when the sun rises. So usually we would stay right until the end, 6 a.m., 7 a.m. But for me this time, again, I was sober, I was uncomfortable. I maybe left at midnight. I was only there for a few hours. And so I went back to my friend's house and I fell asleep. I was then awakened by everybody else coming back to the house several hours later. And I think I locked them out, so they had to come through the window. All of the commotion woke me up. And at that point, and this is where I took my shahada, subhanAllah, at that point, my friend said, and it was the same friend who in Manchester, I said to him, subhanAllah, my best friend, I went to school with him, the school that I mentioned, it was a boarding school, so we lived together. My really close friend, my brother from another mother, he said, I'm going to this after party. SubhanAllah. So it's daylight now. It's 7 a.m. He's going to a different house with people that could be involved with anything. So again, my protection kicks in. I said, I'll come with you because you are a mess. It's probably not, I don't think you should go, but he's definitely going. So I go with him. Well, now we get a taxi. It's me and my friend in a taxi, a black cab, the famous London taxis, and we're going across London to this after party. And the driver, his name, I'll never forget him, Abdul Latif. He's driving. It's Fajr. It's I think Fajr. It's literally Fajr time. So he has his prayer mat in the middle compartment where you have the handbrake. And I'm speaking to Hugo again because this is all I'm talking about is God, Christianity, and I'm speaking to Hugo. Hugo is my dear friend that again I've known for a long time, and I'm saying to him, basically I've got this issue with Jesus, but the taxi driver now is jumping in, and he's saying, brother, you believe in God. His dawah kicking in. Abdul Latif from the subcontinent. Forgive me, Abdul Latif. I can't remember if he was Pakistani, Indian, Bengali, but he was from one of those three countries. 99% sure of that. And I start to say, oh, so you're Muslim. We start talking. And I start to say to him, I was like, the thing is, like, I think Jesus was a prophet. I don't think he was God. And he goes, brother, you're Muslim. And I was like, nah, 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 I'm not Muslim. I'm not Muslim. He's like, brother, you're Muslim. And I was like, maybe I am Muslim. SubhanAllah. He said, brother, take my number, be in contact with me. And I started to think more and more. And I remember I took my Shahada with him. I researched it, how to become Muslim, take your Shahada, say La ilaha illallah. So I researched it on Google. I then voice noted him on Messenger, on WhatsApp, and I took my Shahada with him there. And we spoke back and forth. But he said, brother, I really think that you should go to a mosque. But wallahi, wallahi, I was really scared to go to a mosque. I don't know why. If it was something different, something new, if it was the shaitan. But from that time in London, maybe 2 or 3 weeks had passed and I still hadn't gone to the mosque. Something was preventing me from going. And I don't know why, I don't know how, but one day, again, I was working at the time part time for my younger brother in our hometown. And one day I I woke up quite late actually. But I just had this feeling of like, I'm just going to the mosque today. Like, I've got the courage to go. I'm going to go in there. And it was as if the walk from my brother's house to the mosque was maybe just under 10 minutes. And it was this as if before I had the intention to go, but I froze. I just couldn't go. Something stopped me. This time, it was as if I was picked up and taken. I glided there. It was just smooth. I was just relaxed. And before my heart was racing. This time, I still got a little bit nervous when I got to the door and I got to the steps. But up until that point, I was calm. And as I entered, I remember I opened the door and there was a father and a son. The father maybe 50, the son maybe 7 or 8. And as I opened the door, I looked at him and I said, brother, I don't know what to do, but I want to become Muslim. Can you help me? And wallahi, Ahi, just think about Abdul Latif, the taxi driver, and think about this father with the son. These two situations where, for me, I can't wait, inshallah, for something in my life to happen and somebody be like, yeah, I'm going to become Muslim. I'm going to be like, you're the person there with when it happens. So this guy, when I said it, he got lifted. He was like, okay, oh, okay, come with me, come with me. We walked in, we take off our shoes. And the thing that hit me, I'm used to it now. The smell of the mosque was something I'd never smelt before. And this isn't like something otherworldly or spiritual. It's just literally the smell of the mosque. Is it atta? It's like this. I can't quite describe it, but it's something I'd never smelt before. And I go in, and the guy takes me to the front row. And it's a very significant time for me because this was actually Yawm al-Jummah. This was on Friday. And as I went in, it was maybe 5 minutes before the Asr Jamaat. And this mosque is a subcontinent Hanafi school. So they pray Asr a little bit later. And it was in December. So I can't remember what time, maybe 3 p.m. or something. And he took me to who I came to realize was kind of the guy that actually established the mosque itself, Pakistani uncle. 30, before I was even born, he came to England and established this mosque. So he was like one of the uncles who'd been there for a long time. And his name, Abdul Dayan. Again, I'll never forget Abdul Latif and Abdul Dayan. And he invited me, sat next to him. It was the front row, right in the middle. And he was to my right. And he said, we're just about to pray. He says, do you know how to pray? And I'd been practicing how to pray before. I already got my kufi. I already had a prayer mat. Before I took the first Shahada with Abdul Latif, what I would do is I would pray 1 time a day for like a week, then 2 times a day for another week. And then I wasn't being strict. 1 time, 3 times, whenever, just getting used to it. And I would listen. I'd have my earphones in and I would just listen to the recitation. I wouldn't try to recite it myself. I would just listen to it and I would just do the actions. So I already knew it was Asa. So obviously it's one of the silent prayers. So I knew how to follow along. When the prayer finished, he took me into like the kind of larger room with the big chandelier that they use for Jummah. But this was Asa time now, so this extra bit was closed. And we sat down knee to knee, and he asked me, "So, you want to become Muslim?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I know how to say it." And I butchered it. I probably said it wrong. I was like, "La ilaha illallah." I believe in God, but I didn't know how to say it. Um, and he said, I started speaking to him, and I told him maybe 5 minutes of what had happened prior Christianity, believing in God, Abdul Latif in the taxi. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Brother," he said, "although you are going to become Muslim today, and this is on my like certificate, on my shahada of my certificate of being Muslim, that if I go to, inshallah, if I can take my umrah or hajj, my proof of Islam, I have this date, the 3rd of December, 2021." But he said, even though today you might see yourself as taking first time you've come into a mosque and taking your shahada, because he was a sheikh, and that's what Abdul Latif said. He's like, "I'm just a taxi driver. Maybe you should do it with somebody official." He said, "You have been Muslim in your heart for a long time. This is not just this moment, although it's significant." And it made me think I'd actually been Muslim for maybe a year. That time where I said that angelic experience where I was prostrating and I was supplicating and I believed in God, but I didn't know how to embody it. And every time I came close to Islam, which happened a few times in Manchester, it just felt so foreign and so weird. I was just like, I didn't know that it was a universal religion. I didn't know that it was the complete way of life for the whole of humanity. It just felt like biryani, Indian food. It was spices, it was curry, it was people who had a different look to me. So that really stuck with me when Abdul Dayan, the person who I took my shahada with, the second but the official shahada, when he said that you have, really and truly been Muslim for a very long time. And I kind of thought, yeah, I actually have. And that kind of made everything make sense in hindsight.
How did your perspective on life change after your conversion?
Good question. I think that, again, based on kind of describing my story a little bit, I think that the conversion itself, the 3rd of December 2021, 3 years and 3 weeks, or sorry, 3 years and 2 weeks ago, or whatever it is, that moment with Abdul Dayan, there onwards, wasn't as significant as maybe the year that led up to that point, if that makes sense. My perspective wasn't massively changed because I it had already changed in order for me to embrace Islam. But one thing does come to mind is the embrace, the love, the warmth, the kindness, the generosity from the Muslim community in Aylesbury, my hometown, was, you know, not overwhelming. It was just right. It was perfect. But just, people, coffees and dinners and presents, thobes and kufis and just lots of different things, and just checking in. Do you understand? For example, the khutbah was being spoken in Urdu, the language of the Pakistanis and subcontinent folk. And I had this one uncle that would come next to me, and he would basically translate the khutbah to me as the person was saying it in Urdu. Now, obviously, I know that we should be quiet in a khutbah, but it was the intention behind what he was doing. I was brand new, sat there, feeling foreign, listening to a foreign language, not understanding it, but knowing it was compulsory for me to be there. And this brother would just whisper in my ear what he was saying. And when he would translate, I was on it. I agreed. What he was saying, I knew that that was the truth. But without that, I would have been blind. I would have just listened to a load of mumbo jumbo, incomprehensible mouth noise for 25 minutes. So the embrace of the Muslims, and that really highlighted to me the um, yeah, the generosity and the compassion and the kindness of the Muslims, which you just see continuously um, as a Muslim. When you're outside the community, you might be aware of it, but it just goes to a next level when you embrace Islam. You know, you want for your brother that what you want for yourself, and this sense of community is you can just see it not only in individual families but extended families and communities. It's something that my country of England, it did have. England, like I told you at the start of the conversation, England now the churches are empty. Christianity is dead. But if we rewind to my grandparents, my great grandparents, if we rewind 70, 80, 90, 100 years, actually there was a lot of Islamic traits to English society, the modesty of the women, the the cooperation of the community, the leadership of the head of the household being the father, but Allah being the true peak top of the hierarchy. Um, you know, just faith and morals and mercy and understanding and all these things. So, but that's dead now in England. But I do believe it was present historically. But now that it's dead, the Muslims, and I think this is why there's such a reaction against the Muslims, because I think the indigenous populations, for example, in my country, they find it hard to accept when they see the Muslims and they say, well, actually, they've got strong families. They're having lots of babies. They're content with very little. They have they give the most to charity, and it confuses them. And it almost same thing I mentioned, like when you read the Quran, when your heart's not in the right place, and you read it and you say, you know, and the disbelievers will burn in hell, and you're like, well, I'm a disbeliever, and I'm going to burn in hell. Then you see these Muslims, and you're like, oh well, almost what they call it, um, almost on their spiritual high horse, like a phone, like thinking that not that Muslims are, but in our culture, maybe thinking that they're like phonies. It's like they're holy, but they're phony. It's all like an act. There's a Latin term which I think sums up a lot of secular capitalist materialist interactions. It's quid pro quo, something for something. When a Muslim gives, he gives for its purifying impact, sadaqah, zakat. He gives for reward from Allah. He doesn't want anything in return. He's afraid of anything in return because it might affect his reward. It might stain his purification. But we have a more of a culture of, if I do something for you, then you owe me. You have to, if I do something for you, then you have to do something for me in the future. And I think they see this kind of this more beautiful, this more truly natural to the fitra, to the actual a heart filled with nur. They see this and they can't understand that it's genuine. They think that there must be a motive behind it deep down. But obviously there's not, because our concept of reality is more expansive, it's broader, because it's not just this reality we're dealing with. We're dealing with the unseen, we're dealing with the hereafter, we're dealing with accountability. Allah says in the Quran, English translation for the majority of the viewers, that He asks a question. This is what I love about the Quran as well. And I don't want to jump ahead, but just one little comment is, when Allah poses questions to the reader, that's what I love so much as a philosopher is, is Allah not the most just judge? And we say, Bala, I think. We say, of course. Of course. But when you don't have this sense of divine justice, of objective morality, the Furqan, that which concerns what is right and what is wrong, their concept of justice is basically I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And if I scratch your back and rather if you want to do something for me and you don't want anything in return, then I'm now suspicious and I feel uncomfortable. And I think what that is, it could be, and I'm not a scholar, so this is not Islamic knowledge, but I think it might be like say Allah's divine light, the Nur, scratching at the blackness of their heart when they see the beautiful actions, the undeniable beautiful actions of the Muslims, the solidarity, the piety, the righteousness, the compassion, etc. And it scratches them. They don't like it. But obviously, submission, Islam is surrender, and that's the big thing. Is when you can just put down your guard and just take a deep breath and just say, just go with the tide. Islam's the fastest growing religion. You can't stop it. You know, again in the Quran, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ. You can't you can't stop what's happening.
Mm.
And then suddenly the secular folk, they start to get uncomfortable as well because they feel now that's tension coming. We
Mm.
have an unstoppable spiritual force of Islam. The end times is coming. I don't want to get too far ahead, but again, you can look at the Islamic literature, the ahadith, look at everything that's happening in the modern times. The end times is sometime soon, Allahu alam. And they say, oh, well, if we can't stop it, is that tension? Is that conflict? It's like, no, there's no conflict, there's no tension. But Allah, there's a divine promise. The the Quran, the holy text, this cannot be that cannot be destroyed. Allah will not let that be destroyed. So they can do their best, but it's impossible. Sorry for going off on a tangent.
No, no, no. Um, I have to say, I've really enjoyed your answers. I mean, you're very deep in your knowledge and I can see understanding. And I would just say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you even more
Amen.
and
Amen.
help you on your path.
Amen.
I would like to know, do you have a favorite Quranic verse or hadith that deeply inspires you?
MashaAllah. Firstly, thank you so much. MashaAllah. Everything is from God, honestly. Like I always think that again, the secular person, when somebody tries to be humble, they think there's an ulterior motive, but I really do want to like hide it. I know it's contradictory because I'm coming online. So people are like, oh, how can he be humble? How can he want to be small when is there not a narcissism? And is there not this kind of like ego involved with being online? But it's a necessary sacrifice to my friends and family are not listening to my dawah. Maybe I'm not giving them the appropriate dawah. Maybe I'm not being effective enough. So I thought the best way to shine my light I've got a lot of stuff going on in my head. I need to get it out, is just do it on a camera. And if people listen, they listen. If they don't, they don't. But at least it stops my family from, I think they got the message. And it's just now it's like, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to keep going on. Now the best thing for me is my actions,
Mm.
raising my son on Islam and seeing him grow. Maybe that could spark something in their brains. But I just wanted to say thanks so much for saying that. It's an honor to speak with you. Like the whole point of me getting online and doing my YouTube channel was literally to do these dialogues. And mashallah, you're the first person who reached out to me. Action is everything. To have the conversation. So, really, you reaching out and us having this conversation is is the result that I wanted. It took maybe 9 months, but inshallah there'll be
Inshallah, inshallah.
more in the next 9 months.
And I would just like to say it's truly honor for me also to have you as my first guest. And I'm truly enjoying this conversation. Um, I would like to ask you a very simple question, but very important question. Why should people learn about Islam?
Why should people learn about Islam? Firstly, good sir, I do apologize. I didn't answer the last question.
All right. Go ahead.
But it's difficult. So obviously the correct answer is every ayat in the Quran. And for those that don't know, of course you will. Ayah translates, the simple translation is verse, but this is a rudimentary, basic translation. The deeper translation is a sign or a miracle, and that to me really the correct answer therefore is every ayat is your favorite. But I think for me recently, I like فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Inna ma'al usri yusra. It's a classic.
Subhanallah, yes.
Because and I remember my now brother-in-law. He's my sister-in-law's husband, my wife's sister's husband, who's also a revert from Manchester. I remember when I met him, to kind of as I was courting my wife as we were preparing to get married, he was saying, and I'll never forget it, in the car on the Manchester Ring Road, he said, the strange predicament of the Muslim is that when we're having a good time, of course, we say Alhamdulillah. But when we're having a bad time, we also say Alhamdulillah. When we have a trial, this could also be, the trial is a potential for a huge reward. And the blessing is a huge potential for a failure. Because if we are given massive wealth, how much harder is it for us to be appropriately accounted for that larger sum of money? If you have a little sum of money and you give your portion to charity, it's easy. If you have a big portion, are you going to give that same proportion to charity? Are you going to be led astray? Money, I mean, if I can quickly talk about my experience in Egypt, all of the rich areas in the kind of greater Cairo region, all of the richer areas, their iman is weaker. It's clear, it's obvious, you can see it. It's visceral, it's no hiding. The richer areas, there's less hijab. The richer areas, there's less modesty. The richer areas, you just haven't got this. Allah, a blessing from Allah could be the fact He's not giving you this massive wealth that you desire because of social media and all of this kind of propaganda and mind warping information. But to conclude, I like how Allah, obviously with no mistake, says the same thing effectively twice. Verily, with hardship comes ease. With hardship comes ease.
And some scholars, sorry, just to add here, some scholars have said that with hardship, this means that with one hardship, you will have two ease. Two times. Two things will come. Something good will come twice. So,
absolutely.
Alhamdulillah.
So then, again, the strange predicament of the Muslims, like my brother-in-law told me, is that you are actually genuinely, and this, subhanAllah, this is one of the reasons to answer your next question of why you need to learn about Islam, because it's a life hack. Even straight up, I've started this conversation talking about the philosophical, theological, objective truth, reality of Allah, God, existence, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, the deeper your faith, your iman grows, the more you can get into that stuff. But for the purpose of people thinking about Islam, they're considering it or they're far away from it, but they've come across this content, forget about all that for 1 second. Even if all that wasn't, even if all that wasn't true, the straight up practical benefits, it's still worth living the Islamic centered life. Because when something happens, somebody dies, it's not even permissible you have a period of time where, of course, we're human beings, we're emotional, we cry, we mourn, that's normal. That's obviously completely permissible. But there's a period where beyond to mourn and be depressed and to wail and to complain and to make a big drama. Is that no, you're grateful. SubhanAllah, and this is what the disbelievers can't get. When something terrible happens, because they have this problem of evil, how can Allah exist when there's so much poverty and war and death in the world? Well, the Muslim is grateful. When my loved one dies, especially if they're Muslim, subhanAllah, it's different. This makes me emotional. It's different for me because if somebody I love dies, it's a different, as we say in England, a different kettle of fish, completely different situation. But if you're Muslim and somebody you love who's Muslim, they die, then you're thankful, you're grateful that that person existed, that you knew them, that they were Muslim. You're grateful that they're in good hands. Allah has chosen to take them at that time. It was not meant to be any other way. You can make dua for them. You can make pilgrimage for them. You can give charity for them. You're going to see them again. Nothing's changed. It's actually, this is not a personal attack, but I think the atheist gets same thing with depression. Depression is so self-absorbed. It's so me. The way that this atrocity is affecting me, and I don't like it. Well, what you might not like could be good for you, and what you like could be bad for you. No, again, another Islamic kind of motto. So again, it's just the reason to learn about it is because once you get one layer deeper, which is kind of my intention speaking to the online community, once people get past the propaganda narrative, they get past the terrorism and oppression of women and all this. I was going to say nonsense, but it is very real. This is the other thing I think Muslims should take responsibility and ownership of. No, those things do exist. And we should, as a community, call them out and say, this isn't Islam. Because Islam is the middle way. How can the middle way be extreme? Islam, Jannah is at the foot of your mother, your wife. She's like your princess, your queen. You treat her like she's an angel. Like, how is that oppression? You provide for her. You protect her. You give her everything she wants. Like, they'll pull up verses, about, how Surah 4, verse 34 says that you can hit your wife, daraba. But of course, anybody who looks into it will see that these are just a triad of steps that one will take to avoid confrontation or problematic situations. Anyway, I'm digressing. My point is that the reason to learn about it is because once you get past these fallacies, the two big ones, of course, is extremism and oppression of women, you suddenly realize the depth, like the ocean, the endless depth of spiritual wisdom that can allow you to live a life free of pretty much all of the problems that plague our society. Depression, anxiety, debt, confusion, broken homes, broken families, just peace of mind, tranquility. Wallahi, I don't know what other people are feeling. I'm ecstatic. I am on top of the world. I am so happy. My life is perfect. And Allah also says in the Quran, do the believers not think that we will test them? I know trials and tribulations are coming. I know that I'm going to be tested. I know my life is so good right now. The only way is down. So I'm going to be tested. And that's going to be when I have to maintain this kind of high level of gratitude. And that's what brought me to Islam, was this feeling of, I need to express my gratitude for being alive. The atheist, the person who's watching this who is not Muslim, we can both agree, I'm sure, that we are alive, right? Speaking of philosophy, René Descartes, cognito ergo sum, je pense donc je suis, I think, therefore I am. We are here. Everybody can agree on that. We are breathing. We have a life. We have two options. We can either be, well, maybe three. We could be kind of meh, we're alive, and I'm going to be kind of neutral about it. You could be resentful. You could actually hate, and I get this on some comments on the videos I do. People say, well, I never chose to be here, and I've got these obligations. Why would God place these obligations on me? I don't even want to be here. It's like, subhanallah, how ungrateful can you be to have life, to have all these opportunities that your comment is, well, I never even chose to be here. I don't even want to be here. Of course, in Islam, to take your own life is absolutely haram. Like, obviously, again, and that makes sense. But now, very quick tangent, you'll see in kind of modern trends is this big drive for euthanasia, for the right for an individual to kill themselves. Again, the reason to investigate Islam is to have an alternative perspective. You don't have a right to kill yourself because this organism, this meat suit, this vehicle
It's
is
not
on
yours.
loan. It's not yours. Exactly. It's not yours. It's it's from Allah, and your body has rights over you. Another issue that comes to mind about Islam is the issues with obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, the metabolic diseases in society is also a symptom of people not respecting their body because they think that this is the whole thing of, well, if it doesn't affect you, it shouldn't matter what I do. Well, it does matter because the body that you're loaning, we're loaning from the same creator, and that body has rights over you. So to conclude, it's a vast ocean of wisdom, a different perspective. Just a final comment is, for example, at university, again, if it depends if you're studying anything, you're studying the sciences, the social sciences, it's always best to authentically and open-heartedly, open-mindedly look at an ulterior perspective. And I'm still doing this now with Islam. Like, part of these online dialogues is basically, try and prove Islam wrong. Like, I'm not a big debater. I don't want it to be personal. I don't want it to be stressful, but like, it's good to know, what do the Christians think? What do the atheists think? So I think that you're only doing yourself a disservice if you don't actually dive into Islam. And the other thing is that I used to say this a lot to my friends and family. I think the reason why, whether it's your nafs, whether it's the shaitan, whether it's whatever it is, the reason why you're being prevented from actually authentically looking into Islam, investigating, is because it's like Alice in the Wonderland. Once you go down the rabbit hole, you realize how deep the hole goes, and then you're effectively, both consciously and unconsciously, obligated to embrace Islam. That's the difference between a non-believer and a disbeliever. And this is why, unfortunately, the other reason why I kind of not feel bad, but before I became Muslim, all my friends and family were like me, complete ignorance of Islam. Something to do with Pakistan, something to do with Saudi Arabia, something to do with that black box. We know that Las Vegas is the Mecca of gambling. So I've heard about Mecca because Las Vegas is the Mecca of gambling. That's what they say. If something is the Mecca of something, it's the center, it's the one place, it's the big thing.
I
But they
hate
don't,
I hate that they use that word, but
it's
it
stuff for
is
Allah
it is
because, and yeah, because Las Vegas is like Jahiliyyah city, of course.
uh,
Um, but they've heard these things. I know that they have this Sharia that I don't want anything to do with because they cut hands off and they kill people, and it's this weird thing where they have to pray. They don't really know about it. But once I became Muslim and they know who I am, inshallah, I'm a reasonable person. I'm a normal person. I'm intellectually curious. I like to read. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'll say what I think. I, I'm not disingenuous. I have no ulterior motive. They know that what I'm saying is, my friends and family, they know that there's more than meets the eye. Their fitra, their innate disposition, their natural constitution is not completely closed. It is somewhat open. So I think that actually, if they start to go down the rabbit hole of Islam, this will lead to them embracing Islam. And I think that's what people are afraid of because, to conclude, because of what will happen to their life. And this actually goes back to my initial part of the story, is I had already left my family because of that the adolescent estrangement that I had when I stopped speaking to my mother and my family and so on. I already left them for several years. And then when I reconnected with them, when it came to telling them I was Muslim, I had nothing to lose. If they reject me as a Muslim, then I'm back to square one. It's not such a big thing for me. If they accept me, alhamdulillah, then I can keep building this relationship on fresh foundation. Whereas a lot of people, they're thinking, let's say they've got a girlfriend, let's say they've got a job at a bank, at a casino, at a bar, or something, at a nightclub. They're in an industry, their whole livelihood, their work is haram, their relationship is haram. They might lose their family. I'm fortunate. All my friends and family accepted me as a Muslim. They, do what you want to do. We're happy for you. They even learned Salaam alaikum, alhamdulillah. They learned the words. I gave them this. I gave all of them, for example, this book. The first seerah that I read, the biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Karen Armstrong, who is an atheist, former nun in I think it's Catholic monastery.
Yes.
And my friends, I remember actually reading my friend, who I mentioned earlier, who I told him I was Christian. I was in the taxi with him when I did my first Shahada with Abdul Latif. I remember him reading another book about Karen Armstrong, about the history of God, broadly, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam. And so I knew that might be an accessible book for the non-believer. But my point is with all this is that I almost feel bad because now I've brought Islam into their lives in a way that means that if they reject it, they can't be the category of non-believer, where the person in the Amazon jungle who Islam has not come to them, the person who is just ignorant and doesn't know the truth, the actual tenets of Islam. They haven't got somebody in their life to give them dawah. But all my family now, they have that. So it's a more direct rejection of the truth, which means their accountability will be different, which then makes me think, I don't know, I feel bad almost. But Allah knows best. And obviously our time in the dunya is not over. And I don't know what's going to happen from one minute to the other. Maybe everybody I know will embrace Islam. And there's been stories of this from Muslim converts. It seems a few of the trends that I've seen is much further into their conversion. I've been Muslim for 3 years. Inshallah, say I've been Muslim for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. My children have children. And, there's been stories of, parents of Muslim reverts embracing Islam, in their old age. So my parents, inshallah, they have many decades.
Inshallah. Inshallah. What advice would you give to someone considering converting to Islam?
Very, very simple. The shaitan will give you a million reasons not to. And it's the same thing with anything you are thinking about. If you have the way that you have formulated that question, good sir, is the fact that the viewer is already considering it. And I say, if you're already considering something, let's say you want to, my journey, I've moved to Egypt from England. As soon as I thought that's a good idea, I didn't hesitate. As soon as if you trust your instinct, Allah has given you your instinct for a reason. If you have a bad, let's say you're walking somewhere in Vienna, in Manchester, in Cairo, and as you're walking down, it's Isha time, you get a strange feeling and you hear a bit of a noise. Your instinct's saying something's not right. Maybe there's somebody there that has a bad intention for you. Just run. Don't second guess, because by the time you second guess, something bad's happened. For example, moving to, if it's people's intentions to make hijrah, my hijrah is temporary. Coming here, inshallah, for 18 months, 2 years, Allah knows best, 1 to 2 years, to learn Arabic, to memorize Quran, to just be amongst the Muslim community. But whether it's temporary or permanent, book the flights. Just do it. If you're thinking about it, just do it. The thing is, you'll hear this a lot with the disbelievers, the atheists. They say, what's the punishment for apostasy in Islam? That's what they'll say. They'll say it's death. Well, the reality is the Sharia is a beautiful and relative ethical framework. The reason I mention that is because let's say you embrace Islam in Austria or England, the Western countries that are not Muslim, and you embrace Islam, but you come to realize that this won't happen anyway, because like I say, as you get deeper and deeper, it starts to make more and more sense and reveal itself to you. And any concerns that you have, to be honest, are usually the problematic issue of translation into the English language, for example. That's why it's important to really get to grips with the Arabic language as a new Muslim or come to a Muslim land, an Arabic speaking country. They will get answered because there can be some, especially as a Western, somebody raised in the Western tradition, it is a completely different, not only language literally, but the way your brain works is just different. I think that's the conflict between Islam and the West. It's almost like they're different colors or they're different textures. They're just different. And so I think that's why it's really powerful, inshallah, if there's any benefit, being kind of somebody who navigates both terrains, somebody who's bilingual, who feels just as comfortable in the atheist Western world as I do in the Islamic believing world. I feel just as comfortable in both, and also to some degree a little bit foreign in both. So it's a strange dilemma. But to conclude is just do it, because there's nothing that can go wrong. In fact, that was one of my greatest blessings. Brother, I never read the Quran. When I took my Shahada, I told you in the story, when I was in London and I took the Shahada with Abdul Latif, I had my Bible. I took my Bible down. I was reading the Bible. The first time I took my Shahada, I never read the Quran. And then when I took Shahada the second time with Abdul Dayan, it was at that point that he gave me, I actually still have it with me here somewhere. It's the 40 hadith, and he gave me like Surah Fatiha and gave me these little pamphlets to learn. But just do it. It's the best thing that will ever happen to you. It's okay to feel concerned. One of the great truths, I believe this is a hadith Qudsi. I believe this is a hadith Qudsi. That whatever you leave off in embracing Islam for the sake of Islam, Allah will replace with something greater. And wallahi, my life, take it or leave it, believe me or don't believe me, I'm just telling you, the reality is that everything that I left off, some of which was difficult, which I won't go into right now, all the different components of what I left off, but things that I was attached to, and anything you're attached to, there's rip the Band-Aid off, rip the plaster off the skin, it can hurt, it can be difficult. Everything was replaced with something significantly greater. It's night and day. It's unbelievable. So I would literally set intention, if you're already thinking about it, to number one, go to the mosque. There's no obligation to take your Shahada like I did the first time you go to a mosque. I think that's the best thing to do. But if that doesn't sit right with you, I would just go there and chill in the mosque. And somebody will probably make you tea or coffee. They'll probably sit with you, give you gifts, be really kind to you, make you feel comfortable, answer your questions. It's, to be honest, what I know I've said to conclude a few times now, but masajid are incredibly underutilized community centers. In England, when I was working in England before I came to Egypt, I would say to my work colleagues, because we would work in lots of different locations, I would say that if we need to get water, go to the toilet, just rest, have a cup of tea, sit down and chill. England obviously is notorious for poor weather. So even if it's just lashing it down, rain and cloud and storm, we just want to go somewhere that's dry and not have to, sit in Costa or Starbucks and buy something. If you just want to go somewhere for free, want to go somewhere peaceful and silent, just go to the mosque. Everybody's welcome. They're usually outside of the designated prayer times. They're basically empty. I go and have a nap. SubhanAllah, the central masjid in Manchester, in the city centre, I would literally go there on my break and nap. there was like a little room at the back, lights off. I'd sleep for 20 minutes and then I'd go back to work. So you can nap, tea, coffee, meditate, peace, relax, gifts, kindness, friendship. Go to the mosque, man. Take Shahada. Simple.
All right. I believe that the perception of Islam by many non-Muslims is that it's something very strict. Is that really the
Mm.
case?
Hmm. Almost yes and no. Almost yes and no. I think that there's, in the Quran, English translation, something that could be translated to understand that Allah doesn't place upon somebody more than they can bear. So that's also important to remember. Certainly, as a new Muslim, there is actually, again, I'm not a scholar, but my limited understanding is that there's a lot of leeway, there's a lot of flexibility. If somebody embraces Islam, something, in fact, it connects to your last question, good sir, which is if somebody is not embracing Islam because they drink alcohol every day. I know many people that's the truth for them. They have relationships with many women, for example. They are part of lots of jahiliyyah, part of lots of haram. And they say, well, I can't embrace Islam because I'm doing all this haram. Do not let that stop you from embracing Islam, because the process of embracing Islam is the purification to change those actions in the first place. I mean, take, for example, AA. You probably are aware of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a worldwide kind of community of people who are, it's not just alcohol, it's other drugs as well, who are looking to become sober and beat their addiction. One of the first kind of tenets is to basically pass off your kind of, not responsibility, to pass off ability to say that I am not in control. That's one of the beautiful things about Islam and accepting God, to realize that you don't have to carry this huge burden of life on your back. Allah will remove that burden for you. So if you try and do everything yourself, that's almost thinking that you are God and everything's going to be made difficult. Again, in the Quran, Allah says that, He gives two paths, that you have the path on the right and the path on the left. Those that take the path, let me try and think now. What surah is it? Like, I don't want to butcher the Quran, but you have a path on the right, a path on the left. It's maybe in Surah Al-Layl.
It really doesn't come to my mind. I'm not sure.
But the point is that, inshallah, I'll make a video on my channel describing this exact thing that mine's not coming. But basically, the path of hardship will be made difficult. Forgive me for my thinking. I have to get it, good sir. I have to get it because it's directly relevant to my thought process. So forgive me for the minor delay. But it's related to if somebody is living a life that they feel is preventing them from embracing Islam. Actually, the exact embracing is, yes, indeed. So we have here, inna sa'yakum lashatta. Certainly your efforts and deeds are diverse, different in aims and purposes. Some people, they live for Allah and their burden will be lifted. Some people will live for their own desires and their burden will be heavy. But he goes on to say, فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. We will make smooth for him the path of ease and goodness. But he who denies, وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى, he who denies, فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. He who denies, his path will be made difficult. So this is the strange thing. The person that is on the haram, they think that they can't accept Islam because they're on the haram, but Islam is what will make their journey smooth to leave all of that behind them. Um, sorry, I backtracked to the last question. What was the question again?
It's fine. So I just asked about many people have that perception that Islam is very strict, and I wanted you to talk about that. Is it really that strict?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the reminder. So my point with all that was that maybe people feel that it's this super strict thing, and that's another barrier to entry. But there's a huge, like, for example, if somebody is not completely living the pure straight path, then they don't need to put loads of stress on themselves. It's not strict. The beauty of the Sharia, which again is one of the terms we hear, like Sharia and jihad, these two things people hear, oh, the Sharia, we don't want Sharia in our country, mate. Jihad, do you know what I mean? Are you a terrorist, mate? It's these two words that they're the most misunderstood concepts in the West about Islam. So, because the Sharia, as far as my limited knowledge is aware currently, is that it's a path to basically to water, but a kind of a quenching of one's spiritual thirst, and the path that everybody walks to quench this thirst, to the kind of the divine well that can give you that water, is going to be different. The Sharia is so relative that it gives every individual their right path. So, for example, I've got type 1 diabetes. My pancreas does not produce insulin. So is it obligatory for me to fast in Ramadan? It's not obligatory if I'm unable to. If I have to break my fast, if I go low blood glucose, then actually it is haram for me not to eat because I'll pass out and die. And preservation of life, like I say, the relative hierarchy, the classic example more generally rather than personal is, if you're stranded somewhere and all you have is a barrel of beer and some pork loins, then you are obligated to eat pork and drink khamr because otherwise you'll die. Preservation of life is more important. So my point with all this is that it's incredibly relative. The strictness is the obligations also are really simple. Guys, we're obligated. I'll tell you the way I look at it. We're obligated to breathe. We're obligated. If we don't breathe, we die. We're obligated to eat. If we don't eat, we will die. We don't see these as it's all perception. This thing of like, you don't huff and puff like, oh, I've got to eat today. No, you love to eat. You enjoy eating. There's a variety of foods to eat. That's one of the blessings from Allah. Same thing. Like for me, my praying, especially now that I'm right at the beginning. The surah I'm on as of today, the 12th of December, 2024, is I'm memorizing Surah Balad, the 90th Surah. That's what I'm on right now.
MashaAllah. Allah
MashaAllah.
subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you.
Ameen. Ameen. Thank you so much. And inshallah, if we have another conversation in the future, then I can let you know what day I'm on and what surah I'm on. But for me now, especially with the increased memorization, being able to choose all these different things I can say when I pray rather than just every single time. Obviously, Surah Al-Ikhlas is really, 1/3 of the Quran, and it's so fundamental and it's a foundation. But when you pray this in your salah every single time, it can become a little bit dry, and that diversity can actually increase your iman and can kind of re-galvanize your love for salah. And that's again the importance of understanding Arabic and being able to read Arabic. But my point is that it's not, for me, I don't see any strictness. I can only speak for myself. I don't see any strictness on me. What do I need to do? I need to pray. I want to pray. Anyway, that's what led me to Islam, was this realization of I feel bad. It feels wrong. In an Islamic context, would say haram, but obviously before I was Muslim, I didn't know, but it felt wrong. It felt impermissible not to show my gratitude. It just makes sense. Like, and obviously in Islam, in the Arabic language, the word for disbeliever can also translate to an ingrate, one who is ungrateful. So it's almost like an obligation to be thankful and happy. It's not this like huge thing that falls down on you. And if you're struggling, then there's often lots of options. If you can't do this, then do this. If you can't fast in Ramadan, then give some charity. If you can't go pilgrimage on the Hajj, then you're free of that obligation. If you can maybe support somebody else, give somebody a small bit of money to support them in making Hajj, maybe Allah will give you some rewards. You can what if anything is too much, just do the one below. There's almost different levels. You can go advanced. You can try and follow the sunnah, the way of life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can do the extra acts of ibadah, of worship. You could do a little bit extra, or you could just do the bare minimum. And the bare minimum is such a small thing. It's just like getting up, brushing your teeth. Brushing your teeth is brushing your teeth an obligation? I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but is brushing your teeth an obligation? Well, if you don't want your teeth to rot and your breath to stink, then yeah, it's an obligation. But it's not literally an obligation, is it? You can just not brush your teeth, but there's a consequence. Same thing. Is it obligatory to have a shower or to take a bath? Obviously, in Islam, there is obligations, ghusl, jummah, intimacy, and so on. But for the current non-believer, is it an obligation for you to take a shower? No, it's not. There's no divine stress and anxiety making you do that. It's just that if you don't, then you'll probably have body odor. Or probably you will eventually have body odor. And that's the same way I see it, whether it's brushing your teeth or having a shower, giving time to detach. I came across some sheikh sometime, that said that when you raise your hands for Allahu Akbar, this kind of is almost as if you throw the world away. And at that point, you detach from the dunya. The dunya, from my understanding, I may be wrong, is translated to the delusion. This physical realm, it tricks us. It pins us down. It's weighty. It's heavy. We want to lighten our soul, our heart. We want to be fluffy and light. And the best way to do that is to pray. So what is prayer? Just time to just detach from this world, to be stress-free, to say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, just all praise, gratitude, thanks, dedication. Everything is to say, yo, the creator is awesome because I'm here. Like, thank you for me being alive. Simple as that. So, yeah, it's not. It is, but for good reason. In the same way that we must wash for good reason, we must eat for good reason to stay alive, to thrive, to prosper.
Right. How can born Muslims support converts better in their journey of learning and growth?
First thing that comes to mind, my brother, is by first and foremost being true and proper practicing Muslims themselves. There is nothing more disheartening, in my own experience, as a revert Muslim, than changing your entire life for objective truth, for the betterment of yourself. And one of the things that brought me to Islam as well is I like the Gandhi quote, something along the lines of be the change that you want to see in the world. And I thought, well, I can't change the world, but I can change myself. If everybody was Muslim, we'd have paradise on earth. But I can't make everybody Muslim. I can just become Muslim myself and hope to be a ripple outwards. Is fundamentally, the born Muslims must not just be nominal Muslims. Their name is Muhammad. Their name is Abdullah. But they're a gangster. But they're a waste man. But they sell drugs. They have a girlfriend. Do you know what I mean? Like they're trying to be cool. The coolest thing you can do is be on the deen of al-Islam. The coolest thing you can do, the coolest thing you can do is memorize the Quran. That is the coolest thing you can do in my world. That's what, whether it takes 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, this is because I want it for my son. And it doesn't feel right to me to expect something on him that I do not expect upon myself. That doesn't seem right to me. And this is actually reminds me of my own father. May Allah preserve him and guide him to Islam. I mean, that he always told me at the dinner table, I'll never forget it. He's sitting at the head of the dinner table. I'm usually sitting to his left. He's at the head and I'm at the left. And I remember him saying that his father, my grandfather, would always say to him, do as I say, not as I do. Which basically means I can do whatever I want and I will give you a different standard. So, for example, I don't want to go off on too much tangent, but my father said that my grandfather would always read the newspaper at the head of the table. And obviously, my dad wanting to be like his dad, he would bring his book to the table. And he said, you're not allowed a book at the table. And he was just like, why not? He says, no, you do as I say, not as I do. Maybe that's a poor analogy because obviously there is a hierarchy. But my point is that I want to give my son the Quran. And so that's why I'm focusing on doing it myself. And that's the coolest thing that somebody can do. So for the Muslims, it's not any big tricks. It's not any special actions. Yes, I'll never forget. I posted on my YouTube channel community page a picture of me only a few hours ago, or this time 3 years ago when I first embraced Islam, because on Christmas Eve, a brother called Naz, he took me to Luton on Christmas Eve and bought me my first kameez. I'd been Muslim for 3 weeks. He'd seen me come to the masjid and, just saw that I was wearing trousers and a t-shirt. And I've got my, to be fair, it's winter. So maybe I was wearing a jumper, but I've got tattoos as well. Sometimes it's nice to wear a nice white kameez rather than look like some guy from prison or something. And so I remember, I'll never forget, a gift. That was beautiful. And I was thinking, subhanAllah, this is £30. I didn't expect him. Then he got me some tea and some cake and stuff. And we spent some time together. So obviously that's nice. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to get a gift. But that's kind of the positive. What's even worse is the Muslims, it's not for me to say who's Muslim and who's not Muslim and what people's hearts and intentions are saying, but we need to pray Fajr at the masjid. That is something that, to me, and I'm not perfect, wallahi, I'm not trying to preach, from my high horse. I'm not trying to be, this is my fight as well. And I live my closest mosque, I can see it from my balcony. I should be praying Fajr Jamaat every single day. But sometimes, the shaitan just ties you to the bed, subhanAllah, and then you just pray as soon as you get up, and there's no sin on you for that. But nonetheless, it's, even getting up before Fajr, these little things, I'm almost thinking now individually, but the power of, the mosques. I believe a mosque should be open 24/7. I never think the mosque doors should be closed. A problem in England is the churches. Wallahi, when I was Christian for that short period of time, I would try to go to a church. It's bolted shut. The local youth are vandalizing the church. They're going inside, spray painting, breaking things, stuff for Allah. They're destroying the place of worship. So they have to lock it up. But, it's a beautiful thing. Inshallah, we make it. Allah allows us to reach Ramadan. And Ameen. And, just everybody being in the mosque for that final part of the night. It's the classic thing, praying witr prayer. One of my favorite, I'm going to conclude here because I don't want to go on too long, but my main point is that the born Muslims just need to be Muslim and not be indoctrinated and confused. It's almost, subhanAllah, the Muslims in the West are starting to be Western And Allah tells us, subhanallah, everything in this book is straight miracle. He says that he will replace those with a better people. So what I'm trying to say is that the Muslims, they come to the West, they have their children, they build their mosques, mashallah, they have their strong communities, they have their children, and then a not insignificant number of those children go astray. The Muhammad and Abdullah, they start acting Western. They start listening to music. They start wearing flashy watches and driving fast cars and having girlfriends. The Muslim becomes Western, subhanallah. Then the Westerners become Muslim. They reject because they start to see what it's always, the grass is always greener on the other side, they say. Once you've exhausted all of the fitna, it loses it's not very enticing. Those little temptations, the shaitan can't tempt the person that has already engaged in all of the fitna. It's a different thing. But when you've not done it, it's alluring, it's interesting, it's exciting. And so then you can get lost, and that can be a rabbit hole of many years. So the Muslims, the best thing that they can do to help the non-Muslims is just practice Islam. Don't smoke weed, don't drink alcohol, don't listen to music, don't have girlfriends. Remain Muslim, which is the biggest blessing you have. You don't even realize it, that you can pray shoulder to shoulder with your brother. If I now going to get emotional again, my brother, because if I could pray, and Allah knows if my brother will ever see this, if I could pray with my brother on my shoulder, the whole prayer, I would break down. You know, like the imams in Ramadan, they're choking up while they're reciting because it's Ramadan, it's the middle of the night. They're thinking, subhanallah, this could be my last Ramadan, the blessing Allah has given me. They're crying while they're reciting. Sometimes it happens outside of Ramadan, but the aura, the vibe, the air in Ramadan is different. The whole prayer, wallahi, I would just be, even now I feel emotional, I would just cry the whole time. My brother to my right, my father to my left, to pray just one salah with my brother and my father would just be complete breakdown. I would it'd just be that's like, if I could have more important to me than all, and this is the other protection of Islam, is you can't be duped. Gambling, debt, drugs, everything like that, money, power, you can't be duped into any of that. More important to me than all the money in the world, wallahi, more important to me than power, fame, money, anything, physical pleasure, anything, would be just for my brother and my father to pray 2 rakat with me.
Inshallah.
Fajr.
Inshallah.
So, subhanAllah, the Muslim doesn't realize, let's say that and this is to encapsulate my point, is the Muslim you don't want to be a Jummah Muslim. You don't want to be a Ramadan Muslim. This is not Islam. You don't want to be a part-time Muslim. What you are not appreciating is that when you go to Jummah, when you pray Tarawih in Ramadan, and you pray with your best friend and your brother and your father and your uncle and your childhood friend, you're taking that for granted. But you're not even fully taking it for granted. At least if you were doing it every Maghrib, I could forgive you. But if it's just once, a couple of weeks every year, it's just such a waste. It's such a shame. And the best thing that the Muslims can do is just, and hopefully, inshallah, the reverts can re-inspire them. It can be a two-way street. We can all lift each other up. The born Muslims can be good examples to the reverts, and the reverts can be good examples to the born Muslims. We're all Muslim at the end of the day. I don't really consider myself, I only use it online to kind of give people an indication of my background and my past, and maybe try and get a few more views on the old videos and stuff. But I don't really see myself as a revert Muslim. I know I am, but I just see myself as Muslim. Allah doesn't differentiate between reverts and born Muslims. And
Right.
every born Muslim, as a final point, every born Muslim has to take their shahada in their heart anyway. Because if you're born into a faith and you don't understand it and you're responsible for your actions, you haven't been raised as ideally as possible. Because if you raise a child by the will of Allah in a top manner, in a very good way, then by the time they're 10 years old, they will be incredibly mature spiritually and intellectually. And it's reasonable for them to be responsible for their own actions in the sight of God. But how rare is that nowadays? 10 years old, brother, by the time people are 15, 20, 25, they're hardly responsible. They're so childish, they're so immature, they're so ignorant. So every born Muslim has to draw a line in the sand if they're not on the deen, if they're not practicing, and they need to take their shahada again and see it as a fresh start and be on the straight path, inshallah.
So, you know, this word revert and
Mm.
convert are actually relatively new words.
Mm.
You know, I believe that perhaps 20 years ago, no one used those words. We just say Muslim, you
Mm.
know.
Mm.
Anyway, just wanted to add one more question here before we end. For those Muslims who want to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what advice would you give them?
For those Muslims who want to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what advice would I give them? I guess the best advice is advice that I give myself and that I want to implement myself. And my own recent history, my own recent journey has been, for example, if you're living in the lands of disbelief, as a lot of Muslims are, and that's fine if you're able to practice. It depends where your iman's at. You'll be aware, of course, of Islam, Iman, Ihsan, and if some people, if they're struggling to follow kind of what we mentioned just before with born Muslims, if they're part-time Muslims and such, if you're struggling to practice Islam basic, not praying 5 daily prayers, you're struggling not to, you're struggling, fitna is consuming you, and you're in this angst, this kind of cognitive dissonance of you don't want to do X, Y, and Z, but you're doing X, Y, and Z. Well, Allah tells us that the progeny of Adam, human beings, are going to miss the mark, are going to sin, but He loves those that repent. So making mistakes is fine, that's normal. Don't worry about it. But if you're struggling to practice Islam, a lot of the ulama, I believe, say at that point, hijrah is compulsory because you're not practicing Islam. And if it's difficult for you to practice Islam, whatever Western country it will be, France, England, Austria, America, wherever, then I would make your main focus to get to Egypt, Turkey, Morocco, Saudi, wherever, right? Get to the Muslim world. But for those that are practicing Islam on a basic level, they've got their fard under control, they're praying their prayers, but they're just kind of coasting, they're just moving along, mashallah, but just going along, then I would also recommend a hijrah. It might not have to be permanent, it can be temporary, only because my experience was in the last 3 weeks, like say, An-Nas to Al-Balad is 90, 100, 110, 24, if I'm not mistaken. No, not 14. However many, in the last 3 weeks, I've memorized more Quran than the first 3 years of me being Muslim. In the last 3 weeks, I've learned how to read Arabic. In the last 3 weeks, I've begun to be able to talk basic Arabic things, to be able to, put it this way. How many more Ramadans, a lot of sheikhs say this as well, so I'm just repeating them. How many more, and it just touched me because this will be my 4th Ramadan, inshallah, that I'm coming up to. And and I'm not gonna this. I won't qualify for this on my fourth. Inshallah, my fifth, if I make it to my fifth. How many more Ramadans are you going to stand Taraweeh prayer and not understand what's being said? That's a barrier, Ahi. That's a barrier on your iman. That's preventing you from getting to ihsan. So there's different levels in it. The best way to get close to Allah is, how can we follow the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam if we can't speak the language of the Prophet, upon whom be peace? So I just think for me, what I've done, and again, this is just what I've done, so that's what I'm sharing, is I saved all my money, I bought flights, I quit my job, and now and this is difficult, I'm trusting in Allah. I've not got a lot of money, but I'm not working. I've not got a lot of money and I'm not working. What am I doing? Every day I study Quran, every day I study Arabic. Because we plan for 50 years, that's good. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm all about, buying some gold coins, buying some silver, preparing for the future, your children, a bit of money, get some property, whatever. That's all good. I get that we have to have a foundation. But don't rely on yourself, rely on Allah. You might not live 50 years, you might live another 5 days. And the more, again, the hadith, the narrations of the most well-documented individual in human history is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The more ayat we have, the higher our rank in Jannah. Direct correlation. So what's more important? Money, euros, pounds, dollars, janae, yen, or ayat? It's ayat every single time. So what I decided was I'm going to memorize as much Quran as I can. And inshallah, I've enjoyed this very much. I'm very honored to speak to you and be your first guest. Inshallah, we can have another conversation and I can give you an update on my Quranic memorization, inshallah. I decided to memorize as much Quran as possible until I have no money. And then I'm going to have to borrow some money to get flights back to England from, inshallah, somebody who loves me.
It was truly pleasure and honor to have you here. I just want to thank you again for being my first guest. Before I let you go, I would like you to react to one video, actually. And that's because you grew up on the farm. So I thought maybe this will be interesting to see.
I would also like to say that, the pleasure is all mine. The honor is mine. I'm also very grateful because, that to give me this space, I know that I try to release videos every day on YouTube and TikTok and online and such. But, the inspiration comes from the inspiration comes from the source. In this circumstance, in this environment, you have been the source, the one that's asking the questions, to have somebody who can push you in a certain direction. That a lot of what I've said here, by the will of Allah, I wouldn't have been able to say without Allah bringing us together. And so any benefit that comes, I'm always aware that I can just, growing up, I was always known as somebody who just waffles and talks and rambles and goes on and on. So I always hope to become more concise and precise with what I say to bring benefit to people. But I really do appreciate your time, the space, your inquiry. And inshallah, we will both be rewarded by Allah if somebody gains a little bit of benefit from this.
Inshallah. Now let's see the video.
God's blessings and mercy upon you, all my human brothers and sisters. Today I'm going to share with you an amazing video of 2 parts about the authentic Islamic slaughter procedure on lambs and goats. On the first video, we're going to illustrate the power of God's name as the only method of submission before slaughter. On the second video, we're going to show you the complete authentic Islamic slaughter procedure, only using God's name upon slaughter, exactly the same way that all the prophets have done for thousands of years. Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace upon all of them. Not using stun guns or hammers or any other equipments, electrical equipments, simply only using God's name upon slaughter. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الله أكبر. بسم الله الله أكبر. بسم الله الله أكبر. There you go, baby. This is total submission. Total submission. This guy is ready for anything to be done to him, and he's not nervous, he's not resisting. He's in total relaxation. No panic hormones whatsoever.
Okay, so I'm going to end it here. He does the same actually with different animals, and it's quite fascinating to see this.
Yeah, if I could just say one thing, because like I say, my uncles run the farm. So there's goats there, sheep there. And I remember telling him about the halal form of slaughter. And I think he would really benefit from seeing that relaxation of the goat, because he felt like the idea of the knife and the blade, obviously it's understandable that people can think that it could be quite a kind of intrusive and violent form of death. So the way that he would actually kill the goats would be with a mallet, with a hammer. And he said that it would actually take several hits before the goat would pass. So it would be disorientated and very stressed. Affects the meat, of course, as well. But just something that came to mind, because I think that I said, mashallah, it's beautiful. Obviously, we all live and we all die, and there's no changing that. But the goat was undeniably at ease, ready to meet its creator. Subhanallah. It's been an absolute joy, Akhi.
It was truly my honor to have you, especially
Mashallah.
as a first guest, and
Mashallah.
I have truly enjoyed this conversation. So again,
have me back on, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for watching this inspiring conversation with Miles Gregory Coe. If you find value in his journey and message, be sure to subscribe to his channel, where he promotes Islam with humanity and shares uplifting content to strengthen the iman of Muslims. If you or someone you know has a story of embracing Islam, would like to hear it, your journey could inspire and uplift others, feel free to reach out to share your story on this channel. Let's continue to celebrate the beauty of faith and the diversity of our experiences. Please share this video and don't forget to subscribe for more meaningful content. See you in the next one, inshallah.